Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Friday night, June the 8th, 2018, a couple of minutes before 8 o'clock. I know I said 8 o'clock because the start of the live stream. I figured I might as well just get it started and get underway. I want to begin tonight with a hurricane Aletta in the Pacific. This is not a threat to any land. It's off the southwest coast of Mexico and moving out to sea. But in case you haven't been following this along today, this kind of illustrates a problem that the National Hurricane Center has and speaks about it, and that is the fact that in terms of the forecast, the Hurricane Center has made strides in the track. Where it has had much more difficulty is in intensity, and this, I think, this hurricane illustrates that, because when it became a hurricane yesterday, it was forecast to strengthen maybe a little bit more to about 80 knots, and then it would be gone. However, it went to that 80 knots and went quite a bit more. I have this satellite picture from earlier today. You can see the very well-defined eye and the spiral bands around it. Aletta reached Category 4 status, carrying by satellite estimates top winds of 140 miles an hour. The eye is very much evident here, and you can see it. Let me just put a circle around it, but right there, well-defined system. Also, notice that it has, at least at this point, when it achieved this intensity, Aletta had a very well-defined, let me just get this brush size correct, here we go. Aletta had a rather circular structure to it. When you see these storms achieve intensities like this, they tend to become very symmetrical, and this exhibited all of the characteristics of an intense hurricane. However, since then, even though on the last advisory we are still carrying that top wind of 140 miles an hour, here's the latest satellite picture, and you'll notice that the eye has filled with clouds. The Hurricane Center also noted that there was frequent lightning going on in the quadrants to the north and east, and oftentimes when you see frequent lightning, research has shown that a storm is perhaps past its peak intensity, or may be starting a bit of a weakening trend. You'll see that the appearance here is a bit more ragged looking. It still has a bit of symmetry to it. So here's where the center is. The eye, of course, as I said, it's all filled in. The symmetry is still there somewhat, but it's starting to get just a little bit ragged. But I wanted to at least bring up the point that when it comes to these tropical systems, this is something that we are going to have to recognize going forward, that there is going to be a bit of a problem when it comes to intensity, and that the Hurricane Center will always attempt to get it right, but it may not always succeed in getting it right. And we know that they're trying, and I give them the utmost credit with the work that they do and the task that they are faced with, and it's tough. Make no mistake that it is a very, very difficult thing. So as we go into the weekend, we still have this problem in terms of the upper air, and I'm going to bring up the jet stream for Monday night now, front and center. Whoops, I think I could go back to 100%, and we can. And I just want to make sure that you guys are seeing what you're supposed to be seeing, and you are, which is a good thing. So here's the jet stream for early next week, and it's actually a remarkable pattern for this time of the year. I don't think we've really seen too many patterns like this in past years, but I want you to at least notice the fact that because of that negative NAO, and the state of the other teleconnections, that we have a very well displaced jet stream to the south. It is so obvious with these upper lows that are sitting mostly along 40 degrees north, or just north of 40 degrees north. I'm drawing circles around all these upper lows in this somewhat blocky signature, and the big one here in the east is the one that's most important, because with that ridge that's out in the Atlantic, I'm trying to make an L there, by the way, but with this ridge that's out here in the North Atlantic, it's keeping this complex vortex pinned into eastern Canada from between Newfoundland, between Labrador and Greenland, and then back west towards James Bay. So what winds up happening is that energy continues to rotate around it. Here's the latest upper air energy that's swinging around. There's a trough that has just passed through offshore, and the pattern, I think, going forward is going to reflect this concept. And actually, at least from this run of the GFS, I don't know how real it is because it is deeper in the long range. But when we look at the amplitude of what the models are showing, it is pretty astounding, really. I'm going to bring up, let's see if I can bring up the window. Okay, got the wrong one here. Hang on a second, folks. Let's see if I can bring up the window. I want to try and at least work at this a bit better this time around. And I think that might do it. So I'll make this a little bit bigger. But I want you to look at the upper air as we move through the next couple of weeks, because there really isn't any sign of any hot weather coming into the east, at least. You still have this active jet, and as we later next week, with a big cutoff high in north central Canada and troughs on either side, a bit of an omega block there. The troughs in the east continue to swing down and around. Also note the GFS and a couple of the other models. You've got a weakness in the trough in the Gulf of Mexico, and we do see a tropical system being generated. So I think, you know, it is now the beginnings of it are showing up inside day 5. I think we are going to have to pay attention to this, and the weakness in the ridge that exists. Actually, I'm sorry. Let me just rephrase that. The troughing that exists in the eastern Gulf of Mexico down into the Caribbean is going to create an opportunity for something to develop, and where the track is going to depend on the troughing in the east and the upper ridge that's going to be in the central plains down into the southern Rockies. So how any tropical system responds to this remains to be seen. But notice going forward just how deep the trough is beyond day 10 in the eastern part of the United States. I mean, this is really exceptional going into the latter part of June, and it certainly would suggest that again, outside of occasional days here and there where it could turn very warm, it's going to be really, really tough to sustain that for more than a 1 or 2 day period, and then it will be replaced by near or cooler than average temperatures more often than not. If this verifies, by the way, and I don't know that it will, this is 16 days from now, you know, you're talking about a cold front that makes it all the way down into northern Florida and down into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, which this time of year is rather rare to see. This is a fairly interesting push. Let's call it an interesting push of cool air, if it's right. I think rather than focus on the idea of whether it's right or wrong, I think the best approach is probably to recognize the fact that we are going to continue to have a rather, for this time of year anyway, a dynamic pattern for the month of June. Now we'll go back to the beginning and look at the surface map here. We are, of course, still dealing with this dilemma of this frontal boundary in the east. I think Saturday will be fine. Belmont Stakes tomorrow. Justify will get a fast track. I don't think there'll be any showers in and around the Long Island, New York City area. That looks like if there's going to be anything, it may be down in South Jersey, into Maryland and Northern Virginia. And by the way, that area back even into West Virginia, which has been plagued by heavy rains on and off for the last 2 months, may get some more as we move into Sunday and Monday. Now, I don't know, the models have been really struggling the last few days. The short range models have been really struggling with what's going to happen in the East, and I think part of the reason for this is the negative NAO. And if you think back, excuse me, maybe by the time we get to Monday, I'll have this head cold all gone. But with the state of the NAO the way it is, we are seeing models being very unstable, even in the short range. They're just having an awful time figuring out if the high to the north is going to be strong enough to push that frontal boundary further south. And as a result, we keep getting these shifts back and forth from run to run. Is there a lead wave? You know, the models were trying to pin some kind of lead wave on Saturday, but they're doing less with that and more with a second one that's coming down. Other models disagree and have the dry air further south. I think, at least for this, from the standpoint of areas that have been dealing with some very heavy rains for the last month or two, that you're going to be at risk here for some heavier rains Sunday into Monday. And then you can see by Monday, low pressure weak wave off the Carolina coast. And then finally that high drops southward for Monday and Tuesday. So at least the weather in my neck of the woods will be okay. We've got another weak front that looks to pass through on Wednesday with maybe some showers and thunderstorms. And here's where you start to see this tropical system on the GFS, which it does intensify as it moves it mainly northwestward toward the Northwest Gulf. Now, let me just caution everybody right off the bat. We don't know that that's going to be the case, first off. We have seen a number of model runs take it all over the place in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, this is probably the furthest west that it's shown. It was taking it up in the Central Gulf, taking up in the Northeast Gulf, and just off the west coast of Florida. I think that the way we deal with this is, at this point, is to just realize that this is still in the land of model noise as we are out at 150 hours. I will, however, when we look at the upper air, and let me bring that up. So here's the problem. When you look at the upper air, you've got an upper high. In fact, I'm going to bring this on the paint box so we can look at it there. And I think this will be a bit more useful. So 1 second, folks, as I adjust the screen a little bit. All right, so you can see it here. It's on the paint box, so at least I can draw on it. You've got another trough swinging down into the northeast. Okay, and there's your jet stream running northwest to southeast into the southeastern part of the United States. You have a deep trough in the west, right along the west coast. So you've got basically a southwest or south-southwest flow from Southern California on up into Montana. In between all this, we have this upper high. It's strong, but it's not overly strong. It would seem that this system, unless this trough in the east really drops much further south, it would seem to me that this would probably respond more to whatever the ridge does to its northwest than anything else. So we're going to have to keep a close watch on how models handle all of this going forward with respect to the strength of the ridge that's going to be in between. Very dry weather will be the case if that if we wind up with this. It's going to be very dry from up through the plain states, all the way up from south to north and through the eastern part of the Rockies, while we have cool, wet weather coming into the west, and generally cool and occasionally wet weather into the east. So something that we're going to be watching, of course, with great interest as we go through the weekend with regards to how all of this is going to play out. So let's get back to the surface map here. And aside from whatever tropical system is there, if it's there, the models with the trough that's dropping down in the east, we do see some kind of low forming off the mid-Atlantic coast and affecting coastal areas of the Northeast next weekend. Is it real? I don't know. We'll see. And then that moves out, and of course, with this strengthening northwest flow, as we get into the longer range, you can watch these weather systems. I'll just back it up, but you can see how the showers moving northwest to southeast, and how far south we get a frontal boundary to drop down. I'm highly skeptical, to be honest, with what the model has on that late in the period, day 13 to 16 at this point. It's not something that I'm going to put a whole lot of faith in. I'm going to take a look at Canada. So let's take a look at southeast Canada and see what's happening there. So I did notice that we do have a little bit of snow again up in parts of Labrador. Low pressure dropping southeast across Labrador to east of Newfoundland. And you have one system after another here impacting eastern Canada into the middle part of next week. And that flow basically from the north continues with that complex vortex there. It's going to be hard to warm things up, so it'll probably still be rather cool. I'll be curious to see what the temperature anomalies are here. I could be wrong. Actually, well, we do have some below average anomalies early, and you can see that here, starting out. Whoops. There we go. Let me just make sure you guys can see what I'm seeing, and I think you are. So I'll bring it down so you can look at the date a bit better. And, basically below average through the weekend and into next week throughout much of southeastern Canada. And then after that, Labrador at least attempts to warm up a little bit with that blocking high up in central Canada. I guess it does help to warm things up, and temporarily you break down that flow with that vortex. And as we get to late in the period, you start to see the cooler than average temperatures coming into the east. If you want to look at just how extensive this is, when I looked at the long range with that deep trough like that, I mean that's crazy below normal for this time of year. But again, highly speculative. At this point, we're talking June 24th. That's 16 days from now, and I guarantee you the next run is probably going to be a bit different than what this run has been showing. We live in interesting times weather-wise, folks. Very interesting indeed. So I'm going to come back to the board tonight and say a collective hello to everybody. T-Bear, use the good weather this weekend if you happen to have it where you are, to take advantage to do some planting. If the weather has kept you from doing it all this time, it might not be a bad idea. You have a great weekend too, Israel Frudiger. Let's see. Really hate when people say they don't know what they're talking about. Seriously, when has a phone app ever been accurate 5 days out? Good. That's a good point, Colin. Never. The weather apps, and I've addressed this before. The weather apps. Oh, you know what? I don't think you want to watch me streaming through the chat. I guess I'll bring myself back up full screen. I forgot to do that. Oops. There we go. And here I am. So, yeah, I mean, weather apps there's no human interaction in weather apps. It's all, it is all model driven. The models are now, you can get day-to-day forecasts, and of course the reason why they change every 6 hours is if the app is GFS based. It is going to change every 6 hours in the long range. You guys all know that. If it's European based, which I think the AccuWeather model might be to some degree, you're going to see it change every 12 hours. And it might be because they have longer range weeklies, they go out to 45 days on the European, so I'm not 100% sure. I'm just guessing on all of this. 235 mile an hour winds in Peru. Okay, I will check that. I'm skeptical, but I will check. Let's see. According to the information earlier in the week at the 12Z model, says Anthony Orr, on June the 5th, GFS did have Aletta down to the 930s and 940s. I'm not sure if it kept that up. I don't think it did. I wasn't really paying too close attention to that, Anthony, to tell you the truth. You know, last year there was a stretch where the GFS was having a lot of trouble with pressures, and there were but on a couple of occasions the pressures were shown to be low. Nobody believed it, and I think it wound up being correct. And then on another instance, instance or two, the pressures wound up being shown to be low, and it wound up being incorrect. It does at least illustrate the problem that I mentioned at the beginning that the Hurricane Center has with tropical systems, in that it has intensity issues with trying to figure out the intensity and forecast the intensity is a lot more of a challenge than and it hasn't really improved a lot. It's improved a bit, but not a lot, and that leads to surprises. So you got to be cautious, and they can be surprises, by the way, in both directions. So we have to be especially cautious when it comes to the forecast, especially when the hurricanes get into a position where there's a possibility that they could strengthen into a major hurricane or not, and you want to make sure we want to make sure we get that part of the forecast right. Let me just bring up a couple of things. Go back to the maps here for a second, and we'll look at the eastern satellite view. We're getting these high clouds streaming in from the Ohio Valley. There's also some kind of a low. You can see the circulation well out into the Atlantic. I don't think that that's anything especially tropical, but it was just kind of interesting in terms of the signature on the satellite. Down to the south over Florida, you're seeing showers and thunderstorms flare up. We're still getting this kind of stream of tropical moisture that is running northward from the Caribbean across Cuba into Florida. That has been ongoing for quite a while, and it's going to keep going into next week as we watch to see the possibilities of tropical storm formation. Here's the Storm Prediction Center for tonight. Let me bring up the severe weather situation that is going on. And we do have 2 severe thunderstorm watches up. This is as of 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you are watching this later, be sure you check your local National Weather Service. You can access that by going to weather.gov and checking your local office to get the most latest weather information. But the severe weather risk is up in the northern and central plains there with a slight to even enhanced risk. So we have these 2 severe thunderstorm watches that are posted, and we also have this larger area, this kind of amorphous area of marginal risk, and also a small area of marginal risk over the state of Florida. So I think we did, a pretty decent job of covering everything that's going on tonight and for the weekend. So I just want to leave it at that at this point. Thank you everybody for being here. Now, I am going to live stream over the weekend at some point, but I'm also going to take a little bit of time off on Sunday. So what I'll probably wind up doing is putting up a live stream at some point on Saturday, and if I can, I will do something early Sunday morning, but I'm going to be out. I want to go fishing this weekend. I've had a very tough couple of weeks. Getting this head cold set me back, and I need some Joe time, as I like to call it. So, so I think I may attempt to take a break on one day for the live stream. If it is, I promise it'll only be one day, and I'll be back on Monday. I think there will be a Joe Rayo, Joe Cioffi show tonight, the Joe and Joe Weather Show on Facebook. We'll start that up at about 8:50 We'll probably keep that relatively short as well, but we'll put it on Facebook, and I'll upload it to YouTube a little later on. And if you can't get it, if you don't have Facebook, or if you're not on Facebook, you can watch it off on YouTube. I'll put it in the video library later on tonight, so you can look for that, and you can check out website posts, although I have to admit they were few and far between today, at meteorologistjoecioffi.com. All right, folks, have a great weekend, and we'll see you at some point over the weekend.